Welcome, welcome, welcome to Oblivion in a minute. So, make sure this is up here, and make sure this is here. Just get my notes in order. Where's my chat? There's my chat. All right. I want to talk about Oblivion a little bit before we really fired it up. First thing I want to talk about, like smack dab right at the beginning here, is I want to talk about the fact that nobody's in chat. Am I live? One moment. Viewers at home, I know you're probably wondering, God, why does he always delay a little bit at the beginning? It's because I'm waiting for my stream to go live and for people to show up. You know, it's a pretty normal thing for me to do. So that's why I do this, in case you're wondering. This here. This here. There we go. Oh, it looks like we're live. We've got Mike Romano, Grey Wolf, Zalok, Leander, Berenian. Who's this Vandalia person? I never see them on my streams. Nadaz, Questy. Hello, everyone. The first thing I actually want to talk about is the fact that when I first thought about doing an Elder Scrolls Lorerun, of course I didn't. Absurdity, that's ridiculous. When I first thought about doing an Elder Scrolls Lorerun, I was actually just going to run Oblivion. That was the only game I was going to show. And I figured we'd just talk about the stuff in Morrowind, and talk about the stuff in Skyrim, and talk about the stuff in Daggerfall. Briefly mention Arena throughout the playthrough of Oblivion. It was actually you guys who basically coerced/convinced me into going ahead and actually playing Morrowind and playing Skyrim as well. Now, that may sound like a strange choice, but to explain myself a little bit, not every game fits the Lorerun format. Now, I know that may sound weird to some of you. I know a few of you, especially those of you who've been following me for a while, you know what I mean. You know, not every game is a game that really should be Loreran, if that makes any sense. The format of the game itself, or the structure of it, doesn't really suit a Lorerunning format. So, Morrowind, and arguably Skyrim, but that's getting a little vaguer, but definitely Morrowind, don't really fit the Lorerun format. And we've actually kind of proven this since, you know, for the last 5 days, or 4 days, excuse me, we've been playing through Morrowind, and it kind of hasn't fit the Lorerun format. It's basically been, all right, do a bunch of quests where nothing's really happening, and then stop to talk about stuff, and then do a bunch of quests, and then stop, you know, it's just... Here, Oblivion is a game that much better suits the general Lorerun format, and so I am a lot more relaxed and a lot more looking forward to this than I am for the rest of this run. I also know Oblivion better than the rest of the series by a huge margin. Oblivion is the game that I've played the most by far of the series, and is my favorite Elder Scrolls game. And I don't... like, I'm not ashamed of that, but I do hesitate in saying that because I've gotten hella flack for that opinion over the years. Lots and lots of flack for that opinion. But I want to explain why, if I may. Because Oblivion, what is it that most people talk about when it comes to Oblivion? Let's see. Stupid AI, bad voice acting, and ugly faces. Those are like the most common things I hear. And all of those are true. The voice acting is pretty bad. Actually, the voice acting is very mixed, so most people tend to conveniently forget that there is actually good voice acting in this game. But there is also very bad voice acting in this game. That is true. The faces are ugly. Like, I can name maybe a handful of characters who actually look good in this game, and most of them aren't humanoid. And the AI can be ridiculously stupid. Just, you know. But that's all I ever hear about. I don't hear about the fact that this game introduced a physics engine to the series. I don't hear about the fact that this game introduced story to the series. And yeah, I'm going to go and just say that. This has also been acknowledged. I was actually looking up some interviews this morning. This was actually acknowledged by the developers and writers of the game. And I was actually kind of idly talking about this with Tajongo last night, because they looked at Morrowind and said, okay, that's good, but rather than have the Fighters Guild chain be kill this, do this, get this, kill this, do this, why don't we add some kind of story to those quests? Why don't we have a greater plot emphasis, is actually how they phrased it. I wouldn't phrase it that way because I define plot differently than story, but you get my point. They were like, why don't we make the quests actually involve something? So They took a lot of the base concepts of Morrowind and added a little bit more meat to it. Now, they did take away and simplify in several aspects. That is something that should be acknowledged. As we were talking about just yesterday, the spell crafting thing, which is almost identical to Morrowind, was pulled back in a few key things. They did also get rid of certain spells. The most notable ones to me are, of course, Levitate, Mark, and Recall. Those three spells were basically erased. The game also introduced fast travel to the series, which, I'm sorry, is something I'm hugely in favor of. It also introduced quest markers, which is basically more of a hit and miss in Oblivion, because there are quests in Oblivion that are well written, the Morrowind style, okay, go here, do this, do that. But then there are also quests that are just, you need to find someone, and then it's basically relying on you following the quest tracker. So there's both the good and the bad quest design with regards to the quest tracker. Unlike another game I could mention, which I'm not going to mention, which does that a lot worse. Oh, yes, that's one other thing. The dungeons in Oblivion are probably the worst in the series. Well, that's not true. Daggerfalls are the worst. But of the three we're playing, Oblivion's dungeons are the worst. I absolutely agree with that. And they did get rid of the open lock spells. But they also added an actual mini-game for lockpicking, which is also optional. So I'm kind of... basically, that's like a side grade is what I like to call it. We lose something, but we also gain something. Oh, that's true. Arenas are the worst. So we've got Arenas is the worst, then Daggerfalls, then Oblivions, then Morrowinds, and I would say Skyrims are actually the best, such as it is. And then there's level scaling in Oblivion. This is when they finally embraced level scaling. So this is a lot of bad stuff that I'm talking about. You might be like, well, why the hell do you enjoy Oblivion with, like, level scaling and with bad dungeons and mixed voice acting and ugly people? Like, how could you possibly enjoy this game? It's because of what, for me, the meat of an RPG is. It's all about the story. It's all about the characters. I want you to name I want someone other than Django to name a truly memorable character in Morrowind. Now, I can think of a couple. Dagethur, right? Very memorable. Very distinct. In fact, basically the best villain Elder Scrolls has ever had, I could say. He's up there, right? So we've got Dagethur. No, because you're going to pull it technically, Django. I know how your mind thinks. I want people who haven't lived and breathed Morrowind to come up with memorable characters. Caius Casadus, I think we could add him to the list pretty easily. A lot of people have an attachment to him. Vivek, I think we could add him. And we could probably add Yagrim, even though we really only interact with him once. But a lot of people were like, dude, Yagrim, he's pretty memorable. I mean, he's the last Dwemer. This is where my list stops, right here. These are the 4 truly memorable NPCs for me in Morrowind. The NPCs that, when I think of Morrowind, when I think of characters from Morrowind, those ones just leap to mind. And then if I pause for a minute and I'm like, okay, well, who else is there? Then I might come up with, the Drens. I might come up with Curio, as Absurdity just mentioned. Amalexi actually wasn't that memorable, so I'm not sure I could go with that. Azura, I suppose, qualifies. That's kind of a weird one, though. But I will say Azura qualifies. What else? Dude who wanted the plump wife. I can't even think of his name. What else? Shikage, he's very memorable. Now, the point I'm trying to make is while there are... I'm not trying to say Morrowind has a bad story or plot. In fact, Morrowind probably has one of the best main plots of the series. But almost all of the story in Morrowind was centralized on the main plot. And I kind of demonstrated the fact, looking back, I actually regret doing House Redoran and doing Morag Tong on character, because both of those were so, like, there was a story there, barely, you know what I mean? By contrast, Oblivion, we will be doing the overwhelming majority of quests in this game. Like, I have a huge list over here of the quests we're doing, because almost all of these quests have tons upon tons upon tons of story to them, and memorable characters, so... Switch my discussion around. Now, I am going to ask Django this, because Django doesn't know Oblivion well. So I'm going to... Django, can you name a significant, like a memorable character from Oblivion? I'm honestly curious if you can. I, of course, can, but see, I'm removing myself from this answer because I know Oblivion inside and out. I've played this game like 30 frickin' times. Maybe more, actually. I may play this game again in the future. The Emperor, Uriel Septim the Seventh. Cool guy. We'll be talking about him right off the bat. Lucian, definitely very memorable. Probably his best voice acting gig. I believe that's Wes Johnson. But either way, that voice actor, it's his best gig, easily. Martin, Hieronymus Lex, Sheogorath. Again, I'm keeping my mouth shut. Too many I can answer. The Grey Fox, absolutely the Grey Fox. Capital. Joffrey, yep. Maik, well... It's Lucian, Dakota. That's Lucian. The horse armor. The vampire. The Count of Skingrad. He's actually... Yeah, Maik doesn't count. And Haskill. Yeah, Haskill. The Count of Skingrad, who I actually can't think of his name right now. I'm actually a little embarrassed by that. But he is actually involved in a surprisingly large number of quests. Like, it's kind of funny, because the Fighters Guild intersects with him briefly. The Mages Guild intersects directly with him. He has his own personal quests, and you're interacting with him in house. Oh, and he actually is also part of the main quest. So that's like 4 major story arcs that you go through. Thank you, Hasseldor. There's 4 major story arcs that intersect with the Count of Skingrad. None of the other leaders, not counting like Martin or Joffrey, have that much presence in Oblivion. I always find that funny. Mr. Paranoid Boss Merdude. We will be doing his quest. I don't remember his name either. What is his name? Hang on. I didn't write it down, did I? He's in Skingrad, and his name is Glothier. There it is. Wrote it down. Your best fan. Ah, yes, the Countess of Leowyn. I don't know if I'd call her super memorable, but I will say that I want to kill her in this playthrough because she's a... She literally tortures lesser beings for fun. Lesser beings being Khajiit and Argonians. Fun person. I'm amused nobody's mentioned Mannimarco. I don't blame you. He's not actually memorable in this. It's one of the few quest arcs where I feel they kind of dropped the ball story-wise. We'll talk about that when we get there. Second in command of the Fighters Guild, the grizzled guy, the Dunmer, the Grey Prince. Oh, I will murder her in the face. I might make her murder the one that gets us into the Dark Brotherhood. Because you have to murder someone to get into the Dark Brotherhood. Okay, so Dagathur, yep, Vivek, Azra, Caius. I don't think I'd give you Curio, personally. I wouldn't pick Curio. Divyath Fear, I don't think I'd give you that him either. I don't know who Baladas Demnavani is. Yagram, I'll give you Yagram. Who's Falco? Who's Carnius? Who's Carius? I will give you Helsith. I actually forgot about Helsith. I mean, he was one of the guys we talked about most in that, so I should have given that. So, of that list, I will totally agree with 6 of those. When I hear Baladas, I think, Baladash Molinore! That's for you Warcraft fans. Menker Cameron. Unfortunately, Menker Cameron is not super... he's not the best villain, but I feel like they do some good stuff with him. And I have to admit, and I said this before, Menker Cameron is at least partially salvaged by his voice actor. Because Terrence Stamp is awesome. The end. See, I'm not sure I would agree that Berenzia is memorable as a Morrowind character. I know that sounds weird, because Berenzia is definitely a significant character in the setting, and we had some stuff to talk about it. But if you think about it, in Morrowind, you can optionally talk to her as part of the intro quest, and then you can optionally try to save her life, but actually the Assassination Temple isn't even on her. And that's it. That's the only intersection she has in the game. And that's actually one of my complaints about Tribunal. One of my only complaints about Tribunal. That and the difficulty jump is Berenzia is just a non-entity, basically. I am happy that no one has said Mehrunes Dagon, because I agree that he's not memorable. Mehrunes Dagon is a non-entity in this game, which is funny, because this and arguably the last 3 games, or excuse me, 2 games, not Morrowind, but Daggerfall and Arena were his plots, arguably. By the nine, stay on the roads. I'll give you... You know what? I'm willing to acquiesce to Divyath Fear. I am. Because we do intersect with him for more than one story arc. Yeah, that's true. He was in Battlespire as well. And like you say, there's some interesting characteristics to Divyath Fear. He might be what I'd call like a secondary memorable. And we've named a few of those for Oblivion as well. Anyways, I am not trying to turn this into Oblivion versus Morrowind War, by the way, because I have absolutely no interest in that. I like Oblivion. I like Morrowind. And I even like Skyrim. So I don't think this needs to be a versus situation. What I am trying to highlight is why Oblivion has come up to above the other two for me. You guys know I'm a story guy. Like, I love a good game with good gameplay, and Oblivion does have some good gameplay, and then it makes some other very clear, and distinct mistakes. Cough, cough, leveling. But Oblivion has characters, a lot of characters and characterization, and Oblivion has a lot of story focus. It is arguably the most story-focused of the Elder Scrolls games. Like, Arena, they were just kind of throwing that together. Daggerfall, Morrowind, of course, had a lot of the story being in the books and the main quests. And then Skyrim, well, we'll get to Skyrim. But Skyrim also embraced the Radiant quest thing just a little bit too much, I think. But Oblivion, it's like that right in-between point, in between Morrowind and Skyrim, which actually makes sense if you think about it. It's like, okay, we've still got actual manually crafted quests, and we've still got this, but let's go with more of a story focus for these manually crafted quests. And I do actually agree with that myself, Leander. Now, yeah, Paranoia, there's actually some really, really good side quests in Oblivion. We'll actually be doing several. So, yeah... That's a good way to put that, Skink Warrior. Morrowind's story was in the world building, and Oblivion's story was down here at the ground level. And I was actually talking to Bajongo about this. That's one of the reasons why our debatable counter, which got up to 87 in Morrowind, this isn't going to go up much during Oblivion. I've already predicted this, and I'm pretty sure I'm right. There's going to be the tower thing. There's going to be the jungle thing. I actually plan to talk about both these things before we even start the game. And then there's going to be a couple things regarding the Aedra and the Divines. I should say the Divines, not the Aedra. That's true, Django. That's true. But my point is, I think the main reason why there's less debatables in Oblivion is because it doesn't do a lot to flesh out the world, so much as it does a lot to flesh out, like, the town, to stretch the analogy a little bit. It's like we learn a decent amount about Cheydinal, and the people who live there, and the excessive taxes that have been going through, which have forced certain people to try and find some other means of entertainment, and has actually pushed one of the noble's sons to claiming himself as a knight to try and be able to actually counteract the idiocy that's going through the Imperial Guard. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that kind of interconnects, but it's usually confined. Almost all of this stuff is confined within a town. Very little of it actually bleeds over. So, good or bad, whether you like that or not, it does mean Oblivion's focus is way more down to earth. Now, I do want to talk about those two things. So let's just give this two. So, this is for towers, and this is for the jungle. Let's just get that out of the way, okay? I don't actually want to talk about the tower second, because there's more to say there. Let's talk about the jungle thing, okay? So, a lot of people have already stated... oh, right, actually, I'm sorry, really quick. I know that you're bored looking at a static graphic here. I actually decided... So this game will be the conclusion game of Uriel Septim the 7th. Now, Uriel Septim the 7th has actually been a major player in literally every Elder Scrolls game, up to and including this one. So he's... no, I am not, Crazy Legs. We will be pausing the Lorerun for the premiere run. So we'll be playing Psalm this coming Thursday. So, that's why it's still on the schedule. Otherwise, I would have pulled it off the schedule. The Uriel Septim the 7th, he was the guy you were rescuing in Arena. He was the guy who sent you to Daggerfall. He was the one who sent you to Morrowind. He actually had the least overall presence in Morrowind, but he has been significantly involved in the main plots of basically all of these games. And we'll talk more about Uriel Septim the 7th separately later. But I thought, given that we're about to finally say goodbye to this one who's been with us the entire franchise thus far, I wanted you to see him as he appeared directly before this game. So, anyways, so let's talk about the jungle thing. Now, the jungle thing, for those of you not aware of what I'm talking about, is that in the older games, I believe Daggerfall is the big one on this one, Cyrodiil was described in books as this big, marshy, like, not swampy, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a rainforesty jungle. And so everyone was expecting, if we were going to Cyrodiil, to be in this big, rainforesty jungle. And then we get there, and it's New Zealand. Now, I actually hear about this complained, not to this very day, but I have actually heard of this complained as recently as yesterday. This is something that's been complained about by fans of the series for forever, ever since the game came out, ever since the game was previewed at the E3 2005, I think that was. By the way, this game came out in 2006, and I know that sounds weird because that makes it 11 years old, but in my mind, I feel like it's an older game than that. It's been a busy decade. Anyways, so it was supposed to be a jungle. Now, let's go ahead and be honest with ourselves. The real life, out-of-character reasons why it's not this big rainforesty jungle is technology. That is the reality. We've seen the interviews. We know this for definitive, flat truth. They were originally going to do it that way, looked at the engines they were building. They actually built a new engine for this game, the Havoc engine. Or I shouldn't say built, but you know what I mean. They developed and worked on the Havoc engine, actually adding physics to it, and they basically gave up. They were like, nope. And so they redid it and made it into a more, let's be honest with ourselves, plain green grass, etc. Now, whether that's good or bad, that's up to you. I'm not here to decide whether that's good or bad. What I am here to talk about is the in-character reasoning. Because the out-of-character reasoning, like I said, was the reality of tech. My favorite Oblivion city is Bruma, by the way. That's my home city, easily. Just funny, considering Skyrim. So what Necro says is not necessarily true. There's a reason we put that debatable thing there. There's actually 3 explanations for why this is not a jungle. So there's the super fantastical reason, which is the one Necro just said, that Tiber Septim used the Kim, and with his great access to reality, made it so that it was always green grasslands rather than a jungle. So, retroactive continuity. Now, it's not like we don't know that retroactive continuity exists. Because fear, apparently. Because fear. Oh my god, guys. Thank you very, very much, Josh from Accounting. Those Prime subs are very appreciated, and I'm very grateful. And thank you, Pico, for that thing I never ask you for. I never, ever ask for those, but I do still appreciate them. Thank you. What the hell was I saying? The Kim! Now, it is worth noting, and this is actually something I'll talk about later, we do know retroactive continuity does functionally exist in this setting. And the reason we know that is because of this game. Actually, I mentioned this yesterday, but a lot of the provable facts we have about certain aspects of the setting actually come from Oblivion, which is kind of funny. But anyways, so the Kim, it retroactively changed it. If it's not obvious by the way I'm saying, I don't actually believe that. That's not my personal choice. But it is a valid choice. It's one of the 3 options that might have happened. The second option, which is still fairly magical, and this is one of the reasons we'll be talking about the towers right at the beginning here. Yeah, the Grey Fox is literally a living embodiment of that. The tower is the second option. Now, we'll talk more about what the towers are in a minute, but White Gold Tower, which is the massive tower right at the center of the Imperial City, is a magical construct. So we can say that fairly definitively. And it is something that could be basically altering the landscape around it on a long-term basis. Basically, like, think of it as a terraformer. Over a century or so, shifting it from jungle to plains to forest to whatever. And the second argument, or debate, or whatever, is that the White Gold Tower has been doing this basically ever since it's been there. Ever since it was first constructed. We'll talk about that when we get to the towers discussion. So the idea here being, and there is actually some sufficient evidence to support this, is that like when the aliens were in charge, it shifted to the terrain to whatever's good for them, or whoever was in charge of the tower, and then when Alicia took over, it shifted to something better for them. And then the main Akaviri issue happened with the Psyche, which I'm still probably pronouncing wrong, and then it shifted again. And then it shifted when the Second Empire started with the Remans, and then it shifted when Tiber Septim took over, and then it shifted sometime in between, probably around, I'd say, Uriel the 5th or the 6th, and then it's been shifting back ever since to what we see now. Now, I still don't like this theory, this answer, I should say. There is, like I said, a reasonable amount of evidence to support it. Shrug, it kind of depends on what you think of the towers, which is why we'll be discussing that next. The third theory is actually really, really mundane, and as you might imagine, it's the theory I like best. It's also the theory that was, if you go back to the original interviews, was the original answer, and then later they were like, oh, no, it was the Kim. And that's why most people, like Necro did in chat just a minute ago, most people automatically say, oh, it was the Kim. Because I believe it actually was Kirkbride, came in after Oblivion was done and was like, oh, no, it was the Kim. And he explained away a few other things. The Argonian thing comes to mind immediately with the Hist, excuse me. But the mundane explanation is, oh, it was a translation issue. And I kind of like that. No, seriously. The idea here is that it always looked like this, that Cyrodiil hasn't really changed all that much. Instead, the idea is just that while people were sending pamphlets and otherwise and writing, because the source of information that it is a jungle isn't said by people. It's in the little handbooks and whatnot. And the literal explanation is just, oh, that was a mistranslation. It wasn't supposed to say jungle. The end. That's the explanation. Because it's actually more foresty. Actually, Cyrodiil is a huge forest for the most part. And I do kind of like that, but again, you know me, I tend to go for the more mundane explanations of things. By the way, hi, Race Cat. So, that is my preferred explanation for what's going on. It is worth noting that one way or another, this is a definitive retcon. As I said, the developers and writers have admitted that it was originally supposed to, like when they were originally designing Cyrodiil, it was supposed to be the jungle, and then they retconned it. So, let's not ignore that. Let's acknowledge that. Let's acknowledge Chen's shout out. Nice name. But in order to really talk about the second option, which, if you ignore the first option, which you should, the Kim option, and if you ignore the third option, which I'm okay with, the second option is probably the good middle ground. Because it's still a magical option, but it's a magical option that's way more down to earth than someone accessed the ability to alter reality retroactively. You know? Like a massive terraforming device makes a lot more sense than, I'm going to make it so that this place was always a jungle. Woogity boogity boo. And then he said, Shugamagoo. I hope some of you get that. So, in order to talk about that, though, and the possibilities, we have to discuss the towers. Now, I've already given the second click, but... yeah, me too, Django. Me too. Don't worry, we're actually not going to be talking about Kirkbride all that much in this game, because I'm basically talking about what I've already talked about the Argonian thing, and I'm talking about his other big thing, although he was involved in the Manker Cameron thing, so I think we'll bring him up one more time. Anyway, so, I already gave the second click, and that's for the towers, because what's up with the towers? Is the answer. Now, some people believe that the towers, and I actually wrote them all down here, hang on a second, that the towers were built by the... hang on, I want to get this right. Oh, Christ. The El Ada, the original group that was with Ariel, who may or may not have been Akatosh, and Lorcan, and was involved in the war that led to Lorcan's defeat and his heart being ripped out and all that fun stuff. So that the idea is that original group of spirit beings, which is what El Ada really means, were the ones who built the towers. Hang on, I'll just do this here really quick. So here are the towers, assuming that theory is correct. There's the Adamantine Tower, that's actually in Daggerfall. There's the Crystal Tower, which we don't really see all that much of. The White Gold Tower, we'll be seeing a lot of that one in this one. The Numidian, we're getting a little weird here, but apparently the Numidian was one of the towers, which would mean the Dwemer didn't build the Numidian. It was actually built by the original spirits, and the Dwemer just figured out how to make it work. The Green Sap, which we basically have no idea what the Green Sap is, but it probably has something to do with the Hist. Red Mountain, yes, that Red Mountain, the one in Vardenfell. You can probably already see how this is breaking down a little bit. And, of course, Snowthroat, which is the mountain in the central Skyrim. I have another note here, but I actually can't read my own handwriting. I hate it when that happens. It doesn't actually happen that often. These are the towers. Now, as you can tell, not all of these are towers, but the idea here is that these are things that the original El Adab made in order to maintain the dimensional barrier. Yeah, the throat of the world, that's what they call that in Skyrim. To maintain the dimensional barrier between Mundus, which, remember, is just a planet, a few moons, and then a bubble, if this theory is correct. That's all the Mundus is. Planet, moons, bubble, and nothing else. And keep this segregate from the rest of reality, which is divided amongst the Aetherius and the Oblivion. Those are the two main other things. So this is the one theory, and arguably the predominant theory, that this is what the towers are, and they are what maintain this, and that Now, okay, let me just go ahead and say, even without me analyzing it, you could probably see how this kind of starts to break down a little bit, especially since they argue that Red Mountain, which was crafted, according to the same mythos, by the heart being ripped out and tossed into the sea, was also a tower, even though it was just... I mean, that can be made to make sense, but there's some issues here. It also postulates that they were totally cool with making a literal tower, and then another literal tower, and then a mountain, and then a volcano, and then a golem, and then a tree. I mean, maybe? I mean, mythos are weird, so maybe? I don't know. If it's not obvious, I don't buy this for a second. Now... The funny thing is, even the nature of the towers, like, okay, it's entirely possible that there are no such things as towers. It's possible these don't actually have any significant connection to each other, other than just being, like, wonders of the world, right? Like, you don't look at the Colossus of Rhodes and the pyramids at Giza and say, well, those are clearly both the things that keep Earth separate from... No, they're just massive constructs of significance, wonders of the world, really amazing things that they made that have endured, or at least, well, obviously the Colossus has it, but you get the point, right? The idea here, thus, being that the secondary theory, which is basically a sub-theory of this, is that these things were all built or constructed or were otherwise massive things, and then people started venerating them, probably Ritu, and started venerating them, and they just basically got built back into the mythos. And this is actually probably one of the most believable answers right here. It's not actually my personal headcanon, but it is by far the most believable. The idea that the mythos, because myths change and develop and evolve over time. Like, we've seen this in real-life history. So the idea that, for example, the Aelids might have built White Gold Tower, actually probably did, and then it was this incredible feat of engineering and magic, and oh my god, it's this incredible thing. And so over time, because it's this amazing feat of wonder, it just kind of gets baked in, if you will, to the existing mythos of the creation of the planet, right? I mean, that just makes a degree of sense to me. Still not my favorite theory, but very logical. Now, it is also possible that the towers are basically unconnected at all. That the towers have nothing to do with anything. That it's just a term for the wonders of the world. That's the second major theory, and I don't have anything else to say about that, because that's just the theory by itself. It's just, well, there's a volcano, and there's a giant tree, which may or may not exist, and then there's, the mountain, right? Then there's a tower, then there's a tower, then there's another tower. So there's 3 actual towers. Yes, Pico, which I was going to get into in a bit here. Now, the third theory is the one I tend to adhere to on this one. The third theory is that some of these are actual places that either the Aldmer, specifically the D, or the Aelids either constructed or modified to be magical loci. A lot of fictional settings have concepts of ley lines. Elder Scrolls doesn't really touch on that. But to me, it's not that hard to imagine that such a magically inclined race like the Aldmer or the Aelids and their empires would look at this and say, okay, this right here, we want to build like a place of awesome right here. And so they built this. And they're like, well, we want to do something here. And so they did that, and so forth and so on, leading to the construction of, especially the one we know the most about, White Gold Tower. And that was actually, again, Imperial City. That wasn't actually a capital for most of its function within the Aldmer and the Aeliad dominions, empires, kingdoms, etc. Yeah, exactly, Micromano. It wasn't until Saint Alessia. Yeah, we do literally have shrines and totems and frickin' rocks that we can interact with that have a literal, provable magical effect. So this isn't that out of bounds. It's just they don't really actually talk about ley lines that much in Elder Scrolls. So, yeah, exactly, Leander. That's entirely possible. Anyways, getting back to my point, the idea here then, this ties neatly with what we do know about White Gold Tower, which is that when Saint Alessia took over, led her revolution, united the Nords and the Red Guards and everyone else basically against the Aelids, and founded the First Empire, she moved in to White Gold Tower, and it became a center of governance, and the Imperial City kind of grew around it, rather than it originally being the predominantly religious services that it served. So as you can tell, as usual, I'm picking the most mundane option, but I do still think that, at the very least, ignoring the other towers, White Gold Tower probably is still, at the very bare minimum, some kind of either magical construct or built on a nexus of magical energy, so it does have some magical capacity to it. There's some evidence for this, but nothing I could say provably concrete like I can other things in this game. Now, this is also relevant because something that was written... I told you I'd bring this up, John, because something that was written after the game, after Oblivion was done, by Kirkbride, was said that that the Amulet... Okay, so for those of you not familiar with this game, I know it's like 3 of you, but the main plot, if I was to summarize it very quickly, is there's this magical amulet, which we'll talk about, which is a magical construct, an artifact-level magical item, which allows someone to basically do a magical ritual with the White Gold Tower, again, like I said, very high probability of magical nexus there, in order to maintain a shield to prevent Daedra from basically walking right in and doing stuff. And yes, only people of the bloodline of Alessia, actually, can use this amulet. So that's a thing. And the whole plot is about this amulet and getting it to the right person and reactivating this seal and closing off the barriers to Oblivion, blah, 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 blah. You know, close shut the marble jaws of Oblivion. Now, the reason I bring that up is because someone decided to say that, well, it actually wasn't the amulet at all. It had nothing to do with the amulet or the bloodline. The things that actually maintained the barriers, like I mentioned earlier, between Mundus and the is the towers. And so because the tower is still there, that's why the barrier is still maintained, but it is still weakened because you know the people no longer venerate the tower, or you know it gets weird. I'm just going to say that it gets weird. But I just want to say that I can't stand that idea because it literally invalidates this entire game. And I don't like being told that everything I did throughout an entire game is stupid or pointless or worthless. Like, I'm sure stories can pull that off, but my knee-jerk reaction to, you remember that whole game we just went through? Yeah, it was for nothing. Is just... Okay. You know, to use a parallel, I was one of those people who was upset in Diablo 2 when we went back to Tristram. Now, I've since managed to get, you know, to accept that a little bit more, but that knee-jerk reaction was still there. Even to this day, I'm still a little upset that Diablo 1 was for nothing. And so the idea that Oblivion was for nothing just makes me go, come on, no. And again, the only way that theory works is if we accept the idea that Mundus, which is basically a term for the universe, is a planet, a couple moons, inside a bubble. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, I suppose this is a good time as I need to mention that, for those of you who haven't heard me talk about that. So according to certain individuals, so there's the planet Nirn, right? And that's actually the corpse of some deity or deities, depending on how you define it. And then there's the moons, which are all corpses. And then there's this bubble. Okay? Now this bubble is all of Mundus, and it doesn't go out very far. Like literally, picture like satellite orbiting range, or maybe like I guess as a little further out than our real life moon is. Okay, it's pretty small. Is what my point is. It's not even the size of a solar system, and so when they were first creating Mundus, a bunch of people were like, "Man, screw this, I'm out," and fled out. And as they were leaving, they basically left holes in this bubble, and those are the stars. And Magnus, who was one of the big architects and basically mages of the time, was like, yeah, screw this. And he pieced out, and he created the sun, because the sun is actually just a giant hole in this bubble. Now, I have actually had people argue stridently that this is the truth. I don't buy it personally, but I'm not here to tell you that it's wrong or right. That's not my job. My job is just to report on this and tell you what we do know. But to me, looking at this world, looking at the way this game is built, looking at it sounds very medieval, doesn't it? It sounds like It sounds like an in-universe explanation, to use Carbon's terminology. It sounds like something they came up with, which is just them trying to explain things like a star or stars in the sky without really knowing about it, right? To me, that's a lot more sensible, that this isn't literally a bubble, that it's a planet orbiting a star that's in a galaxy. I mean, we literally see the Milky Way galaxy in Oblivion and in Skyrim, in the stars. To me, it makes a lot more sense that in a world where magic is real, where Daedra are real, that rather than coming up with the many, many different explanations we've come up with in our real-life history for stars and the sun and the planets and all that, they came up with stuff directly connected to the Daedra and the magic and all the other stuff that exists within their setting, right? I mean, that just makes a degree of sense. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this. According to this theory, that hole that is the sun, what's pouring out of that, all that light, that's magic. That's all the source of all the magic in reality, which is smaller than a solar system. I want to remind you about that. Like, for me, a planet where gravity functions pretty normally, and there's seasons and soil and, like, most of the other... I know this sounds weird, but these things we kind of take for granted are things that can only exist in a universe in which base physics apply the same way, right? In other words, it's a lot more believable that this is literally a planet and that this is their explanation for it in universe. But, I do have to admit and acknowledge that we don't know. Because it is possible that that really is a hole in reality that was made by some guy named Magnus because he pieced the hell out because he was sick of this place. And in the war, actually, was what specifically made him leave. Yeah, exactly, like Romano. In other words, I can't believe I got that. In other words, no, I'm not with it. So anyways. So that's all the preamble stuff I wanted to get. You like this sprite of Uriel Septim the 7th here? It doesn't look anything like him. I love looking at that. I know that name, but I don't know what he's been involved with specifically. Okay. I do want to mention one other thing before we actually start the game, just really quick. I want to mention that this game was them... Yes, that's Uriel Septim the 7th. I'm not making that up. They came out with a little phone game right before Oblivion came out, and that is Uriel Septim the 7th in that phone game right there. So, like I said, I want to mention one other thing super quick. Oblivion, he is 80... Oh, I just mathed this out. 87 as of this game. He's been ruling for about 50 years. We'll talk about him more when we actually get to the game. But I do want to talk about Oblivion's ambition. And this actually kind of ties back into what I was talking about yesterday with regards to the leak, with regards to what they might be doing. After Morrowind, the team really started getting ambitious. In fact, some people don't remember, but it was actually a really long development cycle, especially for the time making Oblivion. And part of the reason for that, well, I wasn't counting the simulacra, Lucky Gorilla, hence the point. Part of the reason for that is that the developers of Elder Scrolls were like, we want to adapt. We want to try new mechanisms. I kind of already talked about this yesterday. So Oblivion did add a lot of new mechanics and concepts to the franchise. Some good, some bad, some debatable. But like I said, this is the first time that actually had a legitimate physics engine in the franchise. This is the first time they started writing something that could be a called AI. There was no real AI back in Morrowind, not really. Some people had roaming scripts, which was literally just go here, go here, go here, go here. Some of them had scripts that were roam within range. And that's about it. This is the first time they tried to really make the NPCs do more. And admittedly, I think they went a little bit overboard with it because I imagine, and this is just my impression, but I imagine, hi, Ryotune, most people don't even understand or even comprehend the amount of time and effort people went into scripting everyday behavior for a few thousand NPCs. With very, very few exceptions. All of the store NPCs, all the housers, all the guards, basically anyone that has a name. So if it says like Coral Guard, they just have a generic script. But if it says Bob Bobberson, then he has a schedule, which is both on a daily basis and then on a weekly basis. There are people who will do like this, and then they'll go here, and then they'll go to bed, and then they'll go over here and have some lunch, and then they'll go up here, and then they'll go up to this. And now it's a Tuesday, so he's going to go over to this town and meet with this other person, and then he's going to go back. It's actually kind of insane, the amount of effort they put into that. And I find it weird in its own right. I'm not even sure that it's really, like... It's one of those. I feel it's one of those throw things at the wall and see it what sticks things, because here you go, look, they've got their own daily lives, they've got their own daily schedules, and again there are in the 4 digits of NPCs that they did this for, and they did it manually. I want you to think about that for a second. Then of course there's the Radiant AI, which sometimes is actually brilliant. It really is. And then sometimes it's hysterical. I've already given this example, but one of my personal favorites is if, for whatever reason, a guard is convinced to attack and kill, an NPC, he will then, once that fight is done and that script is done, he will then revert to his typical guard script, notice there's a corpse, lean down and say, the corpse is still warm. The murderer must still be nearby, So it's not like the Radiant AI doesn't have massive issues with it. And of course, the Radiant AI also leads to the random conversations, which sometimes do actually work very well. And then sometimes are just, what? It's even funnier when you have two people who are talking to each other in different voices depending on what they're saying and having no idea what's going on. So... what I'm trying to say is it was very ambitious but rubbish, to borrow a phrase. But I do still give them a tip of my hat for the effort, because at least they freaking tried. That's about as much as I got for that. But we'll talk more about the rest of that later. Let's get rid of Uriel Septim the 7th. I'm going to execute him here really quick. Be gone. It is funnier if they have the same voice actor. Hi! Hi! How are you? I'm doing okay. I hate you. Oh yeah, that's another thing. I'm sorry, real quick. They added a new stat. At least I think. Django, please feel free to check me on this. It's called responsibility. To my knowledge, responsibility isn't in Morrowind. Morrowind did most of its disposition scripting based off of faction flags. Now, there are faction flags in Oblivion. In fact, there are a ludicrous number of faction flags in Oblivion. And I'm not just talking about Fighters Guild, Mages Guild. There are faction flags for families. Like 3 or 4 people in the game have a faction flag for the fact that they're related. They went way overboard with the faction flags in this game. But, No, they have this thing called responsibility, and responsibility basically means how likely they are, based on the severity of the crime you commit, or anyone commits. Actually, it's not just the player, to report it, to basically send off what is effectively a pulse, which then attracts guards, because the guards are effectively psychic in this game. I actually have a mod, which we're not using because I don't need it, but we do actually have a mod that fixes the psychic guards things. No, I don't mean guards. I mean everyone. Everyone has responsibility. This is actually relevant because as part of the Thieves Guild, I have located a spot where we can basically steal at will and none of them will go report to the guard because all the responsibility is set to 0. Bonus points if you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah. Oh yeah, I suppose that's another thing I should mention that Oblivion tried. Voice acting. Now yes, Morrowind did have voice acting, but Oblivion is, like, almost fully voice acted. Like, an overwhelming majority of Oblivion is voice acted, which is, again, a little bit too a little bit too ambitious, I think, because again, I feel like they were stretching just a little bit too far there. And it gets really jarring, too, because, as I said before, there is actually good voice acting in this game. And I don't just mean Sean Bean and Patrick Stewart and Terrence Stamp. There are actually good voice actors that work for this. And then there's the rest of them. And then there's the fact that even the good voice actors share their voices across everyone. And they don't bother to vary their voices at all. Like, there's this woman who basically voices half the women in this game. Not Linda Carter, the other one. And, she has the exact same voice actress that Almalexia did back in Tribunal, and doesn't sound any different. And she also voiced, like, Berenzia and other elves women back in... So, yeah, it just gets a little bit jarring. But I've said enough. Let's actually start the damn game. So let me kill this in the face. Make sure it's showing up right. Yep, looks like it's good. I'm just going to let this play for a second. I overall tend to prefer Morrowind music over Oblivion music, but that doesn't mean I don't like Oblivion music. Oblivion music's still awesome. Tiramisu, ladies and gentlemen. So.
I was born 87 years ago. For 65 years, I've ruled as Tamriel's emperor. But for all these years, I've never been the ruler of my own dreams. I have seen the gates of Oblivion, beyond which no waking eye may see. Behold, in darkness, a doom sweeps the land. This is the 27th of last seed, the year of Akatosh 433. These are the closing days of the Third Era, and the final hours of my life.
So I think we can all agree that intro's awesome. God, I love that intro. Okay. So, I mentioned, there's some flaws in this game. I have mentioned several already. I actually have two more I plan to mention. One of them is this right here. Now, you actually can't see it, but their legs are wrong. Why are their legs wrong? No! Now, what's actually funny about this is I've heard people who hate on this character creator. Now, that I don't get. Like, most of the NPCs in this game, yeah, they're pretty ugly, like, with very, very few exceptions. But the character creator is actually hugely morphic. The amount you can do with this is kind of insane. I wish I still had the image. I was going to share it with you. No, I have not, Sakage. But it does take a significant amount of effort and time to make it, yes. My friend Gary spent a couple of hours the first time he played this. He and I were basically playing this, like, not literally side by side, but I was at my place and he was at his place, and we were on chat, like, talking as we were playing this game for the first time. And we were like, okay. And he spent, like, a couple of hours and made someone who looked astonishingly like him. Because, again, the amount of range you can do with this character creator is actually kind of crazy. And awesome in its own way. In fact, to make the point, and we'll kind of see this in Skyrim. In Skyrim, to use Argonians as the example, because you know me, you can adjust their skin tone between like 8 or 9 different skin tones, the hair between a couple things, and then like change their splotches. And that is basically it, other than like build and height and a couple other things. Not that I'm aware, Django, no. Here, I mean, I don't know if we're going to play Argonian, but I mean, just right off the bat, we already have a few more options than we had there, especially when we get into things like, I kind of want this to go up a little bit, I want this to go in, so less of a jaw. I kind of want that to be more gone. We can move this. And you can make something hideous, and you can make something awesome. And I don't know about you guys, but I prefer having those kind of options. If you want to make someone ridiculous and stupid, that's up to you. I'm with that. I don't. But if you want to, go for it. Now, I will also say that I do overall prefer the aesthetic of the Argonians in Skyrim to here. Make of that what you will. But I could do this if I wanted to. I can't do this in Skyrim. So... let's see. What should we play as? It doesn't really matter. I mean, Bretons are cool. Should we be a Breton this time? Let's even this out a bit, back to where normal skin tone. By the way, there's one other thing that this game did that, in my opinion, has been done best in the series, and that would be archery. I overwhelmingly prefer archery in Oblivion to Morrowind and to Skyrim. The Atronach run, you got it. Oh yeah, we need to pull the age back down a bit here. There we go. Have a fresh face. No, that's not. That's just like medium age. Medium age. What kind of eyes should we have? Green eyes? Nah, it's creepy. I mean, I plan to put a helmet on, so it almost doesn't matter what our eyes are. All right, you talked me into it. We'll play an Argonian. Fine, fine. God. Yeah, let me make this opinion as blunt as I can. I hate the archery in Skyrim. I hated it so much I restarted that character. Because I had wasted all my points in archery. Hated the archery and the way it worked in Skyrim. Blah. Yeah, I know, right, Krallis? Okay, so... obviously we can't be the Nerevarine. We can't be Zevis. Explaining why would take more time. Basically, the simplest way I could put it, if I was to bullet point the difference between Oblivion Archery and Skyrim Archery, is Oblivion Archery is not actually a function of the combat engine at all. It is a function of the physics engine. Because when you shoot an arrow in Oblivion, it actually shoots a physical object, which follows the physics engines and does the arc and all that fun stuff. Now, when that arrow hits, it does an amount of damage based on the arrow, but also based on the trajectory and how much speed it's going and blah, blah, blah. And this is something that, again, was kind of new to the series at this point, because this is how the traps work. Like, when something's swinging and hits you, basically, if anything hits you going at a certain speed, it does damage because of the way the physics work. So it's basically that instead of the combat. In Skyrim, it is basically just a function of the combat engine. It was all rolled right and baked into the combat engine itself. And it feels less like actual archery to me, where you have to, it feels more like shooting a crossbow or a gun in Skyrim, because it was no longer an aspect of the physics. Does that make sense? So I actually know several people who really prefer Skyrim's archery, because at that point it's basically Fallout 3's overall approach, point and click. So, okay, you know what I'm going to call him. You know what I'm going to call him. Whoops. How do I get rid of that? What is this and how do I get rid of this? And why is this even here? I will have to formally disagree with you on that, Dakota. Is it this? No. Oh, okay, figured it out. We're cool. It somehow collected it when I was typing. So here's one thing I do like a little bit better about Oblivion than in Morrowind. It's this right here. I know this sounds stupid and simple, and it really is only a very minor thing, but I like being able to, switch around my armor, my weapons, and then immediately preview what it looks like right here, rather than bowing out and then hitting right-click or tab and then twirling around. Very minor change. I just wanted to mention it here. The menus, of course, are completely different. I will go ahead and freely admit that the UI is not good, just like it wasn't good in Morrowind, and isn't good in Skyrim. The UI has basically never been a strong feature of the Elder Scrolls series. That's true, you do have the little static preview in Morrowind. So this is just... You get used to it. I know Oblivion's UI the best because I've played it the most. I will not make any kind of argument that it is actually the best. So, even Sky UI just makes Skyrim better, not good, in my opinion. Now, I will say one thing I really do like about the way they do this, it actually took me a few playthroughs to even understand this, is being able to set hotkeys like this. I wish you had more than 8. I guess, so at this point they were thinking a little bit more about the console. This game, unlike Morrowind, this game actually came out on Xbox and, or I think it was Xbox 360, and PC same day release. So, in a few ways it feels a little bit more inclined as a console game than Morrowind did. So I want Mark to be there. I want Recall to be there. And I'm going to want the essential actors to be there. Yes, I actually have a spell to add or remove the essential flag to NPCs. Spells, powers, active effects. This is all the same general basic stuff. Yeah, exactly, Corellis, that they had in Morrowind. It's just kind of organized differently. Now, I will say one thing that I find Oblivion to be a lot better at is the world map. Because, first of all, let me just say I love this writing. Or not writing, but the drawing. I love this aesthetic. I actually wish I could hire someone to draw Primus in this style. You know what I mean? It's just cool looking. But ignoring that, it also is a little bit more informative than Morrowind's was. Like, Morrowind's local map is basically exactly identical to this one. Like, yeah, okay. But Morrowind's overworld map was not quite as good as this, and Skyrim's overworld map is so much worse than this. I can't stand Skyrim's overworld map. So, you know, boop, boop. I'm with it. Active quests, existing quests, completed quests. This is kind of basically a natural continuation of what they started in Tribunal, where they started really making the quest journal an actual functional thing. So this is basically just like one step additional after Tribunal with this whole thing. And then, of course, your stats, your race, birth sign, which we haven't said any of this stuff yet. Attributes, which they changed around a little bit of what they affect and what they do. They changed around the skills quite significantly, actually. This is probably the thing I hear about most when it comes to Oblivion dumbing down from Morrowind, because, for example, like a lot of the schools and the spells of schools kind of got baked into smaller things, and like I mentioned earlier, some spells are removed. It's just blade now, rather than short sword, long sword, you know, that kind of a stuff. Whether that's good or bad is, of course, going to be up to you, but there's no denying that they did bring down the number of skills overall from the previous games. And then, of course, there's your faction stuff. Obviously, we're not part of any factions yet. This is going to get overwhelmingly huge by the end of the game. And finally, stats. Now, this is kind of cool. I don't remember if this was in Morrowind, but I do like being able to look at this and be like, hey, so here's how long you've been playing in-game. Here's how many active quests, quests completed, skill increases, you know, your bounty, your Shivering Isles bounty, because that's separate. Fame, infamy, days jailed, you know, and then just like little trivia stuff, like, you know, assaults, murders, trespasses, largest bounty, creatures killed, people killed, places found, locks picked, locks broken, souls trapped, ingredients eaten, Oblivion gates shut, horses owned, houses bought, stores invested in, you know, just all sorts of little random trivia. I like random trivia. I like that. I like it being tracked, so I can just look and be like, aha. Not really a big deal. And I believe that's everything I have to show off right now. Oh yeah, I also want to talk about one other thing super quick. So, yes, Nirnroot's found, because I hate that quest. We're not doing that quest, by the way. Well, that's not true. We will be doing the very first step of that quest, and then we will not be doing the second step of that quest. Jesus, Andrew. So, good morning, Schwartz. I understand. I do hope things are going well for you. The last thing I want to talk about really quick is the modding scene. Now, Oblivion, like Morrowind, was pretty big on mod support. The only game that, you know, I mean, they really, really pushed mod support. But mods are, of course, just like Morrowind, still being made for Oblivion. I don't actually know off the top of my head, Grey Ghost. And one of the very first mods that I ever saw that was made like within a week of this game coming out was an alternate start mod. Now, I personally find that very funny, but it's always interesting to look back at the things that people were all upset about, you know, across history, and just kind of look at it from the lens of the future. Because one of the biggest things that people were complaining about back in the threads and the forums and all that regarding Oblivion was the tutorial, the intro. Not that it was bad, or that it was too long. In fact, it's actually quite short, and as I will discuss as we go through it, very well designed, similar to Morrowind's. But that you start off as a prisoner, and so many role players were pissed off. Like, oh my god, damn it. I can't roleplay a character who is in prison. I don't want to play a role character who is in prison. I don't want to think that I had done some horrible crime. That's unacceptable. And so one of the very first mods that I saw was one to make you, basically it shoved you to the finalize screen right at the end of the sewers. It was very threadbare. They made better ones later, but it was like, and like here. And then people could just say, you know, I'm whatever, and be able to come up with their own thing. Looking back, I find that hysterical, especially given Skyrim. So, I could go through Oblivion's intro in about a minute and a half, if I'm trying. I, of course, will not be doing this here, but I have done speedruns of this game. So, Now let's actually finally, no really, play the game. Also, hang on. Physics. 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 That's crazy talk, Jolly Leprechaun. Physics. Physics.
Hey, lizard. It must break your heart.
This guy's such a dick, by the way. I just want to say, I was talking about memorable NPCs earlier. I don't think this guy really qualifies, but everyone hates this guy. He is a colossal dick. What he says actually varies based on your species, by the way.
Being so close to the water, knowing you'll never get to swim again. You know, sometimes when they let us in the yard, you can hear the sounds from the lake. The boats, the gulls.
I'll give you that, Django.
So close.
I don't agree, but I'll give you that.
You'll never get to swim again, Argonian. But don't worry, you'll be dead soon enough. That's right. You're going to die in here. Hey, you hear that? The guards are coming. For you.
So yes, later on there's actually a question where we can come back in here and, oh, don't worry, we're gonna kill him. I'll wait till later, though. Yes, I do, Micromono. And I've done that on camera.
No, they're dead. I know it.
Can I just say really quick that Patrick Stewart really does awesome work here? Like, I know it's Patrick Stewart, and I know geeks are expected to bow and fawn for him, but I do honestly, legitimately, removing myself from my bias as much as I can, I feel like he threw himself into this. Like, he took this seriously and really added some gravity and weight to his role. My opinion.
My job right now is to get you to safety. What's this prisoner doing here? This cell is supposed to be off limits.
Usual mix-up with the watch.
Never mind. Get that gate open. Stand back, prisoner. We won't hesitate to kill you if you get in our way.
No sign of... Stay put, prisoner.
Good. Let's go. We're not out of this yet.
Oh, I will, Leander, don't worry.
You. I've seen you. Let me see your face. You are the one from my dreams. Then the stars were right. And this is the day. Gods give me strength.
So as I mentioned, Uriel Septim VII, and we will talk about him a bit more here, was really into mysticism, reading prophecies, reading dreams, you know, blah, blah, blah. Let's go ahead and get one theory out of the way really quick. Not really, Blood Brother. Let's go ahead and get one theory out of the way really quick here. I myself have postulated this theory. I'm not even sure I agree with it anymore. The theory was that we came into existence after we read the Elder Scrolls. Let me say this a little bit more clearly, because this gets a little bit weird. Yeah, I'm noticing it too, Django. I'm not sure what's up with that. The idea here is that we more or less literally didn't exist. Like, our character has no past. We basically just popped into existence in this cell. Now, there's actually a weird amount of evidence in favor of this. First of all, the fact that we have nothing whatsoever about our backstory, unlike in Morrowind, where we have a little bit of backstory, and Daggerfall, where we have some backstory. In Oblivion, we basically really do just pop into existence in this cell. Nobody has any idea who we are. The guide only even notices us just now as we're in here. The guards are actually confused by the fact that we're in this cell, because nobody should be in this cell. And then, of course, we are the hero that he has seen in his prophetic dreams. So this is one of those... there is a weirdly large amount of evidence that that is actually what happens here. Now, whether that's because of like some meta thing, or we're a minion of Akatosh, or whatever the hell, there's all sorts of ways you can take this, but the most common theory is that it's due to the Elder Scrolls themselves. We're here, and we were placed here by ourselves once we read the scroll during the Thieves Guild chain. And then... I know this is getting a little weird to consider it, but the idea is that we are an actual initial start point, if you were to think about it from a linear time perspective, is actually when we read the scroll, not when we start the game. Hence, start, boop, read, continue would be the way that would go. So, anyways. Yeah, this is basically a bootstrap paradox. It's exactly right. What if you don't do the Thieves Guild? I have no friggin' idea. Nah, would be my answer to that. Obviously, like I said, I'm not really sure I agree with this theory anymore. I myself have postulated it back in the day. And in fact, I believe I talked about this during my Oblivion rumination. No, I'm never going to talk about it, Necro. I hate talking about lore aspects of things. But it is interesting that this is another one of the situations where we basically just kind of stumble into a prophecy. This is the second theory that I've heard, and I do, over time, I've kind of grown to like this theory more, especially since it kind of ties in with the theory that goes in with Morrowind. The idea here is that thank you, Takoida, I know, right, Sparhawk? Either someone else arranged this, or this is pure dumb luck. But whether it was arranged or luck, it does basically, like I said, stumble into the prophecy. Stumble into his, I shouldn't say the prophecy. What I mean is his prophecies, the dreams and visions he has had about us and about what is about to come. Now, that's not too out of bounds, really. There are plenty of significant... it sucks, the one, but I'm glad to have you here. There are plenty of significant beings of power who it would be relatively easy for them to do this. I mean, you don't even have to be a being of power. You could be just a mage or a guy with connections to make this happen. So it's really easy to plop you down here. And, well, no, there is no first self, Fenrir. That's the whole point of that type of paradox. There is no initial route through the timeline. It was always this way. Hence, time is a linear line. But yeah, the idea that being that someone could be like, here, plop, and then, oh. Now, it's actually possible that, there's plenty of people that could do this. The most common theory I hear is that it's Sheogorath, or someone connected to Sheogorath. Now, that may sound like a weird choice, but if you consider the events that we do here, and the events of Shivering Isles, it kind of makes a little bit more sense why Sheogorath would have a personal stake in us being here at this moment for this event to start. It could also be Azure again. It wouldn't be the first time. The only thing I don't like about that theory is that there's nothing to indicate that Azure even gives a crap about what's going on. It could be Uriel himself. So someone in chat, who was that? Meadfist just mentioned that theory. Because the idea here is that maybe Uriel the Septim, the Seventh, sees you, and, well, maybe there's no prophecy. Maybe there's no big dreams thing. Maybe he looks at you and sees potential. He sees someone who may become, in Elder Scrolls lore, a hero, capital H, and says, all right, I'm the Emperor, I'm dying, the assassins are chasing me right now, let's go. Let's make this happen, right? That is something that is possible. It's also possible there's kind of an in-betweeny of these. Maybe he saw the potential of a hero. Like the potential of someone of significance, someone of will or someone of courage who was going to be able to help these things, but he didn't literally see us. And then he sees us, and then he either decides or recognizes, he's like, aha, you! So again, kind of an in-betweeny thing there that would also make sense. That is true, Django. Okay. My own... honestly, I'm not even sure I've decided. I know, white shorts. If I was to choose one of these, because I do like several of these explanations, but if I was to choose the explanation I personally like most now, as of this point in time, it would be the fact that he did have his visions and dreams, because we've seen that mysticism and prophecy reaching and futuring is a functional, provable thing, but one of the things we've also seen in, like, all of the games, really, is that it's never, like, really definitive. It's not like Bob the 37th, who will be wearing a black blazer and a white shirt, essentially like navy blue blazer and a white shirt, will stretch out his hand and therefore save the world by pointing with his index finger. It's never specific, right? And it can be wrong. I like to think that he did have his prophesied visions, because we know he was really big into mysticism, about a hero. And we basically were here because of bad luck. The prisons were full. I mean, that's not even that hard to understand, right? So we're just plopped in here. Yes, I did, someone. We're just kind of plopped in here, right? And Uriel comes down, sees us, and says, that's the one. And so what I like about this theory is that it doesn't negate the mysticism or his dreams or prophecies, but it also puts the impetus on us, which is something that's always been a thing in the Elder Scrolls series, and something I like. We talked about this in Morrowind. The prophecy can exist, the event can exist, but without the hero, it doesn't mean anything. The hero still has to choose. I like the idea that even if there is a prophecy about us, it doesn't mean jack unless we choose to fulfill it. In other words, both making the coherent event. And I like that. I like that idea. So, that's my personal theory. That's my favorite theory on the matter, I should say. So, sorry, Mr. Uriel Septim VII. Let's talk for a bit. What's going on?
Assassins attacked my sons, and I am next. My blades are leading me out of the city along a secret escape route. By chance, the entrance to that escape route leads through your cell.
So, this is funny. Why am I in jail? The mere fact that that question is there is another point of evidence for the we wrote ourselves in at this point theory, which I mentioned earlier.
Perhaps the gods have placed you here so that we may meet.
Yeah.
As for what you have done, it does not matter. That is not what you will be remembered for.
No, the funny thing is, the most often term for us is not the champion of Cyrodiil. It's actually the hero of Kvatch, which always makes me laugh a little bit. Who are you?
I am your emperor, Uriel Septim. By the grace of the gods, I serve Tamriel as her ruler. You are a citizen of Tamriel, and you too shall serve her in your own way.
Oh, by the way, real quick. When he says gods, to be more clear... Hi, Hidori. Hediori. What he is specifically referring to is the Nine. We will talk about the Nine, don't worry. Well, I didn't vote for him. What should I do?
You will find your own path. Take care. There will be blood and death before the end.
Please, sire, we must keep moving.
Oh yeah, as Bragwin pointed out earlier, one way or another...
Better not close this one. There's no way to open it from the other side.
Looks like this doesn't concern you, prisoner. Stay out of our way.
It's pretty definitive that... Well, okay, here they might have let us go, but later on, Uriel Septim VII will literally step in and be like, and literally save our lives. So, lol, Shadow Machine. But yes, actually, whether or not any of these theories are correct or not, it is one of those direct provables that we would have died right here at the beginning if not for the fact that Uriel basically said nope and spared us. So, let's talk about Uriel Septim VII really quick. There's actually not a lot to discuss that I haven't already covered. Ooh. Oh my gosh, excuse me. I've been talking for almost an hour and 20 minutes. There we go. I haven't decided, Browser. So, the Uriel Septim VII is someone who's effectively ruled for about 50-ish years. Now, I say effectively because back during Arena, we had the Jagartharn incident. They actually referenced this a surprisingly large number of times in Oblivion. I actually found that really weird because I didn't remember Arena that well at this point in time, and they kept referencing the Imperial Simulacra, and I actually ended up going back and looking into it and being like, oh, right, that. Right. But he took the emperorship when he was 20-ish. Forgive me for not remembering the exact age. And has, by all accounts, basically been the best or the second best emperor ever. Now, I want to stress what I mean by that, because within the Septimus Empire, there are three predominant emperors. There's Tiber Septim, duh. There's Uriel Septim the Fifth, which I'll mention briefly, and then there's this one, Uriel Septim the Seventh. Now, what are you guys talking about? Anyways, yeah, that's true. Even his recognizing Oblivion is based on that story. Tiber Septim, as I discussed at length, I'm not going to go all in depth in that again, is one big mess of debatable. Tiber Septim, there's actually a decent... Pelagius... I'm going to put Pelagius at number 4 slot easily. Because it's the Septimus Empire, not the Septim Empire. So Tiber was possibly an individual. I'm not giving any more clicks for this, but again, he might have been a person. He might have been several people. He might have been a good emperor, or he might have been a terrible emperor. But the most common thread for Tiber Septim is that he was a good conqueror and a good leader, but not a good person. Now, obviously, that's not very popular to say, but because he's literally worshipped as a deity. But that most of the accounts of the lore of the setting do tend to coincide with this. Now, Uriel Septim the Fifth, the only reason he's significant is he did what's known as, well, actually, I don't remember what they call it, but it's like the bubble push, where he didn't just expand the empire. He expanded the empire farther than it has literally ever been before or since. He pulled it all the way out to the point where he actually managed to take territories on Akavir. That's how far he was able to push it out. Now, the thing is, that was a huge mistake and led to one of the biggest, downturns of the empire immediately after because, spending tons and tons of money and men on all these conquests, it didn't really work out all that well. The seventh here managed to unify the continent, Tamriel, and by all accounts was a pretty decent person, in addition to being a pretty decent leader. He is actually noted by many people as being a good tactician, as being a good administrator, and as being very charismatic, which is pretty much the trifecta when it comes to being someone like the Emperor. And of course, a lot of players, and I mentioned this in addition to this, but that's all in character. A lot of players tend to have a connection to Uriel Septim VII because we were trying to save him in the first game, we were working for him in the second game, we were freed and sent to Vardenfell in the third game, and he's here, and we finally, we're talking with him like this in the fourth game, and of course, voiced by Sir Patrick Stewart. So, it's not really hard to imagine why this guy is so well known and so well liked, both in character and out. And I do think that's a nice confluence of making him a really awesome person from both perspectives. Oh, God. Nope, wrong button. Is it that one? Nope. Hang on. Give me a second. I gotta figure out what I bound it to. Ah, okay, there we go. That is correct,
Stand aside,
Ariant.
prisoner.
There was still conquests to be had during Uriel Septim VII's reign. I actually agree. It would have actually been kind of nice for Uriel Septim VII to still be relevant as of Skyrim.
Protect the Emperor.
Protect yourself.
For the Empire.
Most of these events are scripted. As I've pointed out before, these are surprisingly well scripted. Even if you really mess with things, the scripts will work to get back on track. It's kind of cool. But the thing I want to point out in lore is the fact that the Blades, of course, are trying to defend against the Mythic Dawn attack. It is Septim himself. He pulls a blade, but he immediately turns to you, and he actually has a thing to go after you and say, defend yourself, protect yourself. It's just a little thing, but it again kind of shows his mentality right now. That's an opinion thing, Blood Brother. And yes, so all of the Mythic Dawn, and I can prove this here, all they have is the hood and the robe. That's all they've got on them, and plus their weapons. Sometimes not even their weapons. For the most part, everything the Mythic Dawn are using is summoned gear. Now, we've talked briefly about summoned gear. But it's a thing that's been in the series before. You literally cast, summon mace, and then summon armor, and that's what these guys do. Now, you might be like, well, what's the point of that? Well, yeah, it's a conjuration thing. In lore and in gameplay, summoned gear is pretty good. Like, it's not the best gear in the game, but it is very good gear, and you have access to it very easily thanks to conjuration. So in other words, it's a lot easier to temporarily get really nice, bound gear. Thank you, bound gear. Especially if you need it for basically like one mission. And again, this is a factor in lore as well. So there is a thing where people will basically go and give themselves good gear for like the next hour, and then go, wow, yeah. So I kind of think it's a cool little aspect of the Mythic Dawn and their entrance here. It's also brilliant from an out-of-character perspective because it means you don't get their nice gear. Because their nice gear goes away once bound gear desummons. Because bound gear desummons on death. So I think that's kind of clever, personally.
Captain Reno?
She's dead. Sorry, sire, but we have to keep moving.
There's trouble ahead.
Now, I've never actually relied on bound gear personally, but
Go back now. Don't worry, sire. We will get you out of here. They won't be the.
Whoops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt his dialogue
I'll
there.
take point. Let's move. You stay here, prisoner. Don't try to follow us.
Well, but what should I do? There's nowhere else to go. Oh my god. Rats! Rats! Nom, 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 nom. Delicious rat meat. Where's my rat meat? Where's my rat meat? God, I'm so hungry. Oh, that's good stuff. Okay. So you can kind of already see one of the reasons why I consider this a good tutorial. You can already see that there are good design choices that are going into this. Now, it is fairly railroaded because this door, like, is one of those needs a key doors. Now, that was a thing in Morrowind as well. That's not new. But what the game means when it says needs a key is it's basically the GM saying no. Logically, in lore, don't worry, Roy, I will. Logically, in lore, there should be no such thing as a needs a key door, like in the entire setting. There's always some way to either pickpocket or magically get your way through any door. Needs a key means this is a quest interference. That's not true, Django. There are several doors in Morrowind that function the exact same way, that have the same scripting. I know this for definitive fact because I can name one right now. Towards the end of the Solstheim quest, there's a door that you have to go through that you need a key, which is actually the guy you have to escort through you. The only way to bypass that is with console commands. So... Okay, I'll give you that. In base Morrowind, you are correct, because even the door to Vivek is just 100 security, or excuse me, 100 lockpick requirement. So, here we have some brilliant brickwork. Oh! It's actually a little bit of a shame, because I don't know about you, but I do think the brickwork has aged pretty well. Now, it's worth noting I do have a texture mod on, but this is basically the high-def texture pack right here, and yeah, no, it's nice. Oh yeah, Hell System, that's another one. So yes, I'm going to talk about it. Now, I know a lot of you are bored of hearing me say about this, so if you want to tune out for like 5 minutes, please feel free to do so. But I'm kind of honor-bound to talk about this here, since I'm doing a lore run, and some people may not have heard this story before. This is a bucket. This is a bucket that adheres to physics. When I was first playing this game with me and Gary, like I said, we were basically on voice chat or text chat when we were playing this game for the first time. We were playing it pretty much right next to each other. And we saw this bucket. And yeah, there were the manacles, and that's kind of cool. But then if you go over here, there's a bow. There's actually every form of gear in this intro. It's another thing they do well here. There is melee weapons, light armor, heavy armor, lockpicks, torch, spells, scrolls. It's basically everything. Yeah, let's go and get those. So we were like, okay. Now, that was kind of neat. But then we were like, hang on. The bucket's actually leaning because of the arrow that's in it. And if you take the arrow out, it goes back to not leaning. The fact that it rendered the arrow, the fact that it acknowledged the arrow's impact on the physics of it, was something we just geeked out about for like, God, I don't even know how, like half an hour or something like that. We were here at this bucket like, oh my God, this is so cool. What if I put another arrow into it? Oh God, it's leaning even more than before. That's so cool. Hey, Garrett. He's like, yeah, I know. Oh my God. And we just sat here, like, playing with this stupid bucket for like half a freaking hour. Like, oh my God, this is cool. Go ahead, make fun. This was the second game I had played with a proper physics engine. Now, Half-Life 2 had actually come out a year and a half before this. Roughly, I forget the exact month. And Half-Life 2 probably wasn't the first physics game, but it was certainly one of the first ones to really popularize it. And it's one of the reasons why so many sections of Half-Life 2 are literally just physics puzzles. But being able to just play with a physics engine like this was just neat. It was the kind of thing we could just jazz about. Because now you can see it's kind of balancing itself out. Although you notice this is when the vibrating things comes in, because sometimes it's like, So this is the lockpicking minigame. Now I'm going to go admit something. I don't like this lockpicking minigame. And, as a related note, I suck at this lockpicking minigame. Now, the point is, you have to put it up, and then you have to wait for the moment when it's good, which is not the moment it first hits up. There's like a separate moment for each of the 5. Most of my friends tell me you can listen to it and be like, there, and then like there, or whatever. If you prefer this one or not, that's totally up to you. I don't actually care. I will totally disagree with that, Django. But the other nice thing about this is it's actually bypassable, because if you are a Morrowind person who wants to use skill, that's what this button's for. Because you can use it just based on the skill, or you can do the minigame. So if you're really good at the minigame, you can go through locks that are way past your skill, or you can just rely on your skill. It's pretty much the perfect have it both ways kind of a thing, and I do like that. Now, one other really cool thing about this intro, in fact, probably arguably the coolest thing about this intro, is there are scripts running right now tracking everything I do. There are scripts on specific objects, scripts on weapons, scripts on enemies, and scripts on your stats. And when you get through here, there will be a scene where, what's-his-face, I can't actually remember his name, but the guard will flat out say, hey, I bet you're a such-and-such, and then he'll offer you a class. That class is the one based off of what you've been doing through this. It's basically Oblivion's version of the goat. Barris, thank you. It's Oblivion's version of the goat that we had back in Morrowind, and we will have in Fallout 3. Now, it would be cool if we still had the goat option. That would be nice. But I do like that they still have that same thing here, and the amount of effort that was put into tracking what you're doing is something I have to give credit for. So this door is locked, so I can lockpick it, or I can just grab the key, which is right here, and some more lockbooks. And you notice we got some scrolls, if you want to start going in that direction. There's some potions. There's actually stuff you can get to craft here, too, if you really feel like it. And, of course, just like in Morrowind, you can make a class, or you can just select your own. And, God, I love the archery in this game so much. I'm sorry. Can I just explain? I've talked about the archery so many times in this game, but the easiest, quickest, simplest way to explain why I love the archery in this game is that when I first played this game, I've actually done archery in real life. I used to go to lessons and classes and actually pull the bow back and actually aim and blah, blah. It was a lot of fun. I like doing it. When I played this game, it fit in my mind so perfectly with playing archery in real life. I'm like, okay, he's about that far away. And it worked. that's probably the simplest way to explain why I love the archery in this game. Oh yeah, also, just like, so there you can see right there, I am now visible. You know, but now I'm invisible, so now I get sneak bonus. Boop. Whoops, I actually missed on that one. There we go. So, ew, gross. Zombies are so gross in this game. Like, they literally look gross. I'm not even going to get a close-up of them, because they're gross. Anyways, I point that out. Morrowind obviously had the same thing with the stealth indicator. Although, I do prefer Oblivion's a little bit better, because Oblivion's is literally right there at the center reticule. Whereas in Morrowind, it's a little thing in the lower left. Now, that being said, I do have to mention there is one thing that Oblivion does arguably wrong and has led to issues over the years. So, if I hit take all, nothing happens. Because his corpse is still there. I can move his corpse. I can be like, hey, come here. Come here. But what I cannot do is get rid of his corpse from the cell. Now, anybody who's played Morrowind for any extended point of time knows the importance of dispose of corpse, right? You know how significant that is because of memory leak problems and because of the game just getting bogged down with keeping track of all this stuff. In Oblivion, you cannot manually delete corpses, at least not in the base game. There are mods that do this. Now, the thing that Oblivion does is every 3 in-game days, it basically does there's a timer that's set, and it does a wipe of any given cell. So if I just sat here for 3 days, these corpses would be gone. But I do think that was a mistake, and that we should be given the option to dispose of corpse. It's not like it's going to really affect any quests or anything, because most of those quests and most quest NPCs have the essential flag, because they introduced the essential flag in this series. Now, I will say there are a couple reasons, like a few very minor reasons why I could see why they wouldn't want you to do that. For example, let's say you're in the middle of town and you're sneaking along and you've managed to find one sliver of a space where someone's going to walk by you and you'll still be stealth, so you can murder someone in the middle of town and dispose of their corpse instantly, and no one will notice, because noticing corpses is something that the new AI is designed to do. And I'm not just talking about the guards walking up. I mean basically putting them on alert status. It's not quite to Dishonored levels, but it's the same general concept. That's one of the only reasons I could come up with for not allowing us to dispose of corpses. At the very least, it would have been nice to be able to give us an option to adjust how often the cell purges. Bring it down to 1 day and up to 5 days, maybe, I don't know, something like that. Uh-oh. Oh, God. Oh, God, it's a rat. Okay. We're cool. Yeah, that would have worked, too, because at that point you're being rewarded for going out of ways. You're forgetting the spell of get rid of corpse. So. And yeah, obviously you can purge the cell buffer in the console, but I'm basically trying to talk in game design terms, ignoring the console commands. Console commands are, of course, awesome, and should be in every game for basically the reasons we've just talked about. No, I haven't used a spell. I don't really plan to for the tutorial. Like I said, this is my preferred method of playing when I'm not cheating my brains out. Mud crabs. Wait, I hate mud crabs. Hey, boring. Gotta get all that rat meat. I think this tomato's good to eat. What do you guys think? Here, let's test it. Let's eat this tomato here. It's all black and gooey. Oh. What's funny is you can take as much time here as you want. No, Ribbon. Not without mods. Let's just say that as bluntly as we can. Alright, you're right. Let's go ahead and do some spells. Whoops. So, okay, this is actually another thing that's slightly different from Morrowind. Whether this is good or bad, that's totally up to you. But you draw your weapon, you put away your weapon, but regardless of weapon or not, you have a completely separate button for casting. So let's cast Flare here, for example. So even though I've got the weapon out, or even if I don't have the weapon out, that's how spells work. Now, I kind of like that personally, but only because I like the streamlining of it. In my opinion, some streamlining is actually good. Para exemple, you know, to use the Morrowind example, in order to go from this to casting, I'd have to hit F and then hit R, which would bring out my hands, and then click. Whereas in this, it's just, I have my bow out, oh, I need to cast a spell. Whoop. We'll talk about Skyrim's system when we get there. Oh yeah, that's another thing I meant to bring up. Let's talk about some lore stuff. So, some people have actually asked, how the hell does the Mythic Dawn know about this super secret back passage thing? This is actually in canon, because I've done that, Braven. And to raise acrobatics as well. Because Jagger Tharn was part of the plot to basically deal with this before, and has actually been through these places before, and Mehrunes Dagon was informed about this place, ergo, Mehrunes Dagon was able to inform the Mythic Dawn, and blah, blah. The point being, this is actually something that's in canon and in lore. This isn't a debatable or a theory or whatever. Because of the events of Arena, which also involve these exact same dungeons we're going through right now, that's why the Mythic Dawn knew to come here when they went after the Emperor. I can't play these games in third person personally. No offense to anybody who prefers that, obviously, but I can't do it. Is it this button? No, hang on. There we go. Yeah, I can't do this. This just weirds me out too much. Oh god, yeah, I'm getting a little weirded out just doing it. Let's go back to this. Oh yeah, well, I'll talk about that when we get outside. Well, yeah, you gotta show off new armor. Or you can just do this. Behold. But yeah, no, I get you. Uh-oh. You know what this means? Skull physics! Sorry. Has anyone even heard the music thus far, by the way? It's been playing. It's playing right now. I just want to make sure it's the right volume. Now, there are a few tutorial things here. It's probably the only thing that could be debated to be a negative for this intro is the little tutorial messages that show up. I don't mind them that much because it's really, really easy to just be like, yep, click, 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 yep, click, yep, yep, click. It's pretty quiet. We'll see what it's like outside. No, I have not, Zoan. Although I have tried quite a few builds in these games before. Oh yeah, so we talked about this in Tribunal. Traps were introduced to this game. Alright, hands up. How many of you never saw this the first time you played through this? You'll notice I'm actually not raising my hand. Because I saw it for the same reason I saw it this time. I was sneaking. When you're sneaking, not only are you moving slower, but your camera's actually a little bit lower. So it's actually like, oh, there's a thing there. And as I mentioned, the traps in this game are almost entirely physics-based. Like, you know, just walking up to this doesn't do anything, but... Oh, hang on. But... if I were to stand here... Oh, okay, I didn't get the swing enough. But basically, if something hits you with sufficient velocity, it does damage, is what I'm trying to get at. Like I said earlier with the arrows. the game does get a little trap-heavy for some things. I'm willing to forgive that, because I did say that, right, Django? Didn't I literally just say that? Like I said, this started in Tribunal, but traps. Pretty sure I said that. Anyways, I can forgive it here because, again, they're playing with a new toy is what it really boils down to. Actually, I'll get the arrows too. Oh, gotcha, Chunga. Okay. So yeah, you missed it. I started my sentence with, this started in Tribunal, but this is like them taking it up a notch because most of the actual story dungeons, story caves and whatnot, and forts are pretty big on the traps, like this. And as you can see, again, we kind of showcase how the story, or excuse me, the tutorial is trying to tutorialize. I mean, I know this is all very basic stuff nowadays, but I just gotta give praise when praise is needed, because if you're walking through this, you can see how they framed things, too. The only way to progress through this is to go through this, right? Hang on one second. Excuse me. So the only way to progress is to go through this. So whether you're coming at it from this angle, where you can see the logs immediately, as soon as you're around the corner, or when you come in from this angle where the logs are visible from a distance, you'll notice the logs also cover the majority of this. They're not halfway across, they're like 2/3 of the way across this thing. The point here being that pretty much no matter what, your attention is being designed by the nature of how this is going, and with the light right there, to be like, bam, look at this. And then, of course, a naturally curious player will walk up and be like, huh, and there's a use icon that shows up, and that's usually about the moment the goblins attack. My point being, again, this is all very basic stuff, but I have to give huge praise for this tutorial dungeon, because it is very well designed from a gameplay perspective. Yes, I absolutely mean that, absurdity. No other dungeon in Oblivion, well, I shouldn't say that so definitively, but most other dungeons in Oblivion simply do not match up to the tutorial dungeon. It's very clear that a lot of effort and time was put on really crafting this as precisely as possible. Like this, for example. So, the whole dungeon up till now has been fairly linear. Mostly corridors, some smaller rooms. Like this is about as big as any room has gotten right here. And then we have a corridor which leads out and opens up into a larger area. Now we have multiple enemies here. There's actually 3 total. I already just killed the one. There's the mage down there, and there's the other on the other side. So it's like, And now it's the whole point of this room is basically, okay, now that you've learned how to sneak, how to do spells, yeah, exactly, Dakota, how to do spells, how to do, all the, we've basically shown you how to do all sorts of stuff. Here's a room with some enemies. How would you like to progress? It's a very typical thing in game design. You give a player ideas and concepts. Oh yeah, there's also rats here. You give a player ideas and concepts, and then you give them a place to do it. A place to try out whatever they like best. No, where is he? There he is. Well, there's the rat. No, that is him. But yes, the final Goblin Shaman, I actually have noticed that before. At first I thought it was just me screwing up on the sneak, because I've tried to just sneak through this room, and you can't. That Shaman will pretty much always see you. I believe it is actually possible to bypass him, but his awareness stat, or whatever they actually call it in this game, is basically unnaturally high. So here's our next guy. And then there's the Shaman. I'm happy I haven't missed yet. I figured after touting how good I was at the archery in this game that I would suck at it. But isn't that how it always is? I'm really good at this game. Fail, fail, fail. This is also where you can get your first magic item, such as it is. That isn't, a scroll or a potion. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do that. Boring. We're going to be cheating our balls off. It is a Lorerun. I'm just having fun with this while I can, and there's a lot to talk about in this tutorial, so it doesn't really matter if I take my time. In fact, we're actually pretty much up to the second part of the tutorial already, so go ahead and grab those for no reason. Yeah, we have mega cheats for Oblivion. So, stop sneaking. Okay.
Find a defensible spot. Protect the Emperor until help arrives.
Help? What makes you think help will get here before more of those bastards? We need to get the Emperor out of here.
Oh no. Hey, Ginger Ninja. I'm happy. I'm getting to play one of my favorite games today. There we go. Sometimes the AI is smart, and sometimes they're not.
Prisoner again. Kill him. He might be working with the assassins.
No, he is not one of them. He can help us. He must help us.
As you wish, sire.
So there's where he
They
saves our
cannot
life.
understand why I trust you. They've not seen what I've seen. How can I explain? Listen, you know the Nine, how they guide our fates with an invisible hand.
See, I do wish that there were more options here, because I'm a slavish devoter of the Nine is incorrect. But I'm also not on bad terms with them. I'm actually kind of cool with the Nine. I also do think about it a lot, so all three of these are actually wrong for me. I'll go with this option.
I've served the Nine all my days, and I chart my course by the cycles of the heavens. The skies are marked with numberless sparks, each a fire, and every one a sign.
I know, right, Django?
I know these stars well, and I wonder which sign marked your birth.
Each of the Elder Scrolls characters that I've played through are actually recruits. Zevis, Zeros, and Zerevos are the three of them. I kind of started it with Zevis, and I kind of kept it going. So, nothing really to add here. Same general stuff that was back in Morrowind. The only thing that's changed is, of course, the actual stats have changed. Now, it's worth noting the Atronach does still work basically the same way it did. You don't regain magic over time. Instead, you have 50% spell absorption recharge your magicka. Your base magicka is also increased by 150 points. So you can still do an Atronach playthrough, and that's still kind of cool, because you can still break it or still have it as a challenge run. You know me. It literally doesn't matter what I pick here. Anyone got a preference? Other than Atronach, I'm not picking Atronach. Yeah, unlike, say, Dragon Age Origins, what we choose in dialogue basically doesn't matter in this game. This is not a game for that. You know what your choices are in this game? Do a quest or do not do a quest. Although that's true in the whole series, so whatever. Yeah, sure, Steve, done.
The signs I read show the end of my path. My death, a necessary end, will come when it will come.
But no! Emperor! My Emperor! I failed you! Please tell me someone got that. Let's talk about that amulet really quick, because he's going to bring it up quick, and then he's going to talk, and I don't want to talk over him or after him, so I want to talk about the amulet right now. So the amulet is definitely and definitively a powerful magical artifact. We know that for absolute certainty. It is also something that can only be properly wielded by properly utilized by members of the Alesia dynasty, the bloodline that he is a part of. Now, to explain what I mean by that, this isn't the case like it is in some cases where if you put it on, you die. Anybody can wear the amulet, but only certain people can... Thank you, Nerazaz got it. Only certain people can actually use it. I kind of like that particular thing. I've liked that approach to magical items, where there's a magical item that's just, a knife. Unless you happen to know how to activate it or use it, or as someone who can use it, in which case, boop, and now it's a knife of super amazing, plus 37, or something like that. And yeah, the fact that we literally cannot actually use that amulet is probably, if not definitively, the single reason why he doesn't just say, here, take the amulet, IW Emperor, go light the fires, So, shrug. Now, well, yeah, that's in gameplay is the one, but not in lore, as I mentioned earlier. Pardon me one moment. Supposedly, and I have to say it that way, in an earlier build of this game, anybody you could just put it on normally, and apparently players were screwing around with it, so they made it so you couldn't actually equip it. So anyways, I suppose that could also be retconned in lore, but to my knowledge, they never actually did. But yeah, as was pointed out, Maker Cameron has absolutely no problem wearing it. So I'm pretty sure that the only reason the whole can't wear it thing is because of the beta problems with playtesting. Again, I don't know what you could break by wearing the amulet. I have no idea. I'm sure. I'm not good at breaking games. I'll ask Andrew. He could probably think of something. But anyways, getting back to the amulet. I will go ahead and give one more. We don't know. Because we don't know some specifics about the amulet. Like I said, it is a very powerful magical artifact. It definitely can only be activated by members of this bloodline, whether it's the Septimus bloodline or the Alessia bloodline is kind of up to you. And whether or not, we do know that stuff about it. What we don't know is what it exactly is, and there's three predominant theories about what this amulet is. So the first and most common theory is that ruby is literally crystallized deity blood, because of course the gods came down and were like, life is pain, and then they made the amulet. It's specifically Akatosh's blood, and Akatosh is one of the 9, although probably isn't an Aedra by definition, and crafted the amulet in order to be a sign of his covenant with the people that he had helped after the war against Lorcan, which makes absolutely no sense. And then it was like, here you go. You have the ability to... I think I actually nicked my shirt there. And then you have the ability to use this in order to maintain the barriers against Oblivion, and to prevent Oblivion from spilling over freely and easily. Now, I want to stress that really quick, because we do have to talk about the barrier, because the barrier is a fairly definitive thing. It's not a debatable thing. A certain person, who shan't be named, insists that the barrier doesn't work the way that the games themselves provably showcase the barrier to work, so let's just take that and throw it out the window, because I think we can actually eject this in this case. But the point here being that the barrier... So, if it wasn't for this barrier between this planet, Nirn, and the Dimension of Oblivion, the Dimension of Oblivion could just come here all willy-nilly. Now, you might say, well, isn't it that way now? But actually, no, it is not that way. In this particular, in reality, in the way it is. It takes significant time and effort to summon, cast a summon to summon a Daedra. The more powerful the Daedra, the more skill and knowledge it takes to summon that Daedra. And the Daedric lords, with very few exceptions, can't manifest here at all. If they do manifest, they can only manifest temporarily, and they are susceptible to banishment. So what I mean by all willy-nilly is that people could literally walk in, like, if it wasn't for this barrier, Mehrunes Dagon, yes, we have Zoan, unfortunately. Mehrunes Dagon could literally just, on a Tuesday, say, you know what, I feel like destroying Vivek City. Excuse me, there we go. And he could just do that if he felt like it. So this barrier prevents that sort of casual entrance into the Nirn. And again, this is a provable fact. Now, again, whether that's because it's the blood of Akatosh, or because it actually contains the souls of the previous leaders and the Alessia bloodline, and this has been getting stronger over time, or is just a very powerful crafted magical artifact, dunno. Like I said, that's why I gave the click earlier. Oh, by the way, I should actually... share what I meant about that second theory really quick, because one of the theories is that Saint Alessia herself is actually, her soul was in the amulet, and then it was passed down to her descendant, whose soul went into the amulet, and then it was passed down, and then that soul went into the amulet, and so forth and so on. Hence powering the amulet and keeping it going, and also part of the whole bloodline thing they've got going on. Because, yeah, it could literally, and as the third series mentions, it could just be a very powerful soul gem, a very powerful magical artifact that someone made. All of this is possible. Don't know. Like I said, that's why I gave the click. So, I've talked about Septim the Seventh. I've talked about the amulet, and I've talked about the towers. I think that's all I really wanted to cover in this intro. I'm not going to talk about the blades yet. We'll talk about them later. So... I love this, by the way. You know, he says, I'm going to die. And my first thought is, well, what about me? Because apparently I'm a selfish dick. I mean, we're doing the Dark Brotherhood, so I guess that's a given.
Your stars are not mine. Today, the steed shall speed your progress on the road to destiny.
Aren't you afraid to die?
No trophies of my triumphs precede me, but I have lived well, and my ghost shall rest easy. Men are but flesh and blood. They know their doom, but not the hour. In this, I am blessed to see the hour of my death, to face my apportioned fate, then fall.
Can you see my fate?
My dreams grant me no opinions of success. Their compass ventures not beyond the doors of death. But in your face I behold the sun's companion. The dawn of Akatosh's bright glory may banish the coming darkness. With such hope, and with the promise of your aid, my heart must be satisfied.
But where are we going?
I go to my grave. A tongue shriller than all the music calls me. You shall follow me yet for a while. Then we must part.
You may as well make yourself useful. Here, carry this torch and stick close.
Can I just say really quick, while the writing of the rest of the game is debatable in terms of its quality, it's very clear that they really took their time polishing Uriel Septim VII's dialogue here at the beginning. They really took their time with it, and I think it comes out really well, in my opinion. One other thing I was going to mention really quick. Just to make this clear, because it's not really talked about that much. Obviously, the main quest, you know, most of the focus is on the Mythic Dawn, which is a cult of Mehrunes Dagon. But again, if that plan had succeeded, we would arguably have bigger problems than that, because it wouldn't just be Mehrunes Dagon. Again, any of the Daedra could just show up and be like, "Hi, I'm bored. Stomp, stomp, stomp." You know, I do think that I do know that we would have basically life would probably become an absolute hell, more or less literally. And you think Tamriel's bad right now? Anyways, can you tell me about the blades? Can you tell me about the Septim?
My job is to make sure the Emperor gets out of here alive, and I intend to do it.
Oh, okay. So Boris is kind of weird. I like him because, to me, he comes across as very pragmatic. Like, when he moved to kill you earlier, there was no malice there. It wasn't like, oh, I will take out my anger or my frustration, because he's in a very stressful situation. So it would actually make sense if he was like, screw you, stab, stab. But no, it was just, you might be a threat, so I'm afraid I have to kill you. Oh, the Emperor told me not to. Okay, well, you might as well make yourself useful. Could you hold a torch for us? In other words, he's just really professional, and I kind of like that about him. It's one of the reasons Boris kind of... I'll be trying to save his life later, because whether or not he lives or dies is actually up to you. Or rather, how you do a particular quest. So I'm going to go ahead and equip my torch that he gave me. There it is.
Stick close and let us do our job, and you'll be all right.
Who was Glenroy? Oh, you're right, it was Glenroy who's threatened us. Whatever, my bad. I still stand by my statement. Boris has always struck me as super pragmatic.
Protect the Emperor! Oblivion, take you!
Oh yeah, for the first time they actually started attacking us. Whoops, I have the wrong spell equipped. How did that happen? Oh yeah, by the way, if you ever wonder why people kind of sneer at you when they look at you, that's just their disposition. It's also the ha if your disposition is high.
Take them down! Protect the Emperor! Watch your back, boy. The Emperor needs help!
So I gotta ask, how many of you really thought he was gonna die right at the beginning here? I didn't, by the way. I'm not gonna raise my hand because I really didn't.
I don't like this. Let me take a look.
I mean, God's sakes, it wasn't actually the first time that we've saved this guy's life in this series. I think they could have absurdity, but as I think I pointed out earlier, they were already, frankly, way too ambitious with this game, and it kind of shows with the places where they didn't quite succeed. Wait, what? Ah, it's too late.
Damn it! The gate is barred from the other side. A trap!
What about that side passage back there?
Worth a try. Let's go.
We got this, guys. Totally. I know, right, Lander? I know, right, Haboring?
What's your call, sir?
I don't know. I don't see any good options here. They're
Yeah,
behind us. Wait here, sire.
I know what you're seeing,
Guard
Django.
him with your life.
Yeah, me too, Josh. Like, I figured he'd die, but like the first, like you say, the first act of the quests would be, hey. And yeah, this is a very clear trap. We are clearly being funneled into a specific area. And now, I do love Oblivion. But probably one of my biggest complaints about the main quest is right here. The fact that they literally remove control away from the player. They put us into they basically turn off player controls so that the Emperor can die. Just to make absolutely freaking sure, no, really, that you cannot save him. And that irritates me. Now, with console commands, it's possible to save him, but the game has no way of dealing with that. So it's just like, ugh.
My gods are strong and true, that even the might of the blades cannot stand against the power that rises to destroy us. The Prince of Destruction awakes, born anew in blood and fire. These cutthroats are but his mortal pawns. Take my amulet, give it to Joffrey. I have a secret son, and Joffrey alone knows where to find him. Find the last of my blood and close shut the marble jaws of Oblivion.
Love that line. Your amulet? Then this is goodbye?
This is where my journey ends. For you, though, the road is long and dangerous. Now, give me your hand.
I gotta be honest. I won't forget you. You were probably the best Emperor we have literally ever had. And I don't know about you guys, but I think we can all agree that we were cool. See you around, buddy.
Remember me, and remember my words. This burden is now yours alone. You hold our future in your hands.
So you can see, can't move, can't interact, can't do anything.
You chose a bad day.
Actually, they are, Django. That's the extended goodbye. I'm not even sure how I triggered it. I almost always fail at that.
We failed. I failed. The Blades are sworn to protect the Emperor. Now he and all his heirs are dead. The amulet. Where's the Amulet of Kings? It wasn't on the Emperor's body.
He gave it to me.
Strange. He saw something in you. Trusted you. They say it's the dragon blood that flows through the veins of every septim. They see more than lesser men. The Amulet of Kings is a sacred symbol of the Empire. Most people think of the red dragon crown, but that's just jewelry. The amulet has power. Only a true heir of the blood can wear it, they say. He must have given it to you for a reason. Did he say why?
Yeah, he said I need to take it to Joffrey.
Joffrey? He said that? Why?
Something about another heir.
Nothing I ever heard about. But Joffrey would be the one to know. He's the Grand Master of my order. Although you may not think so to meet him, he lives quietly as a monk at Waynon Priory, near the city of Coral.
Well, yeah. I mean, for God's sakes, they're literally the Special Op Forces and the Secret Intelligence Agency. I should hope he's not super obvious like you are right now with your friggin' katanas. So, can you tell me how to get there?
First, you need to get out of here. Through that door must be the entrance to the sewers, past the locked gate. That's where we were heading. It's a secret way out of the Imperial City. Or it was supposed to be secret. Here, you'll need this key for the last door into the sewers.
Okay, thanks. What do you mean about the sewers, though?
There are rats and goblins down there. But from what I've seen of you, I'm guessing you're an experienced acrobat. Am I right?
Acrobat? Really? That's what you picked? So what do we got? Acrobat is stealth, agility, endurance, security, sneak, acrobatic, marksman, block, blade, speedcraft. Actually, that's pretty accurate to my normal playstyle. So never mind. It actually picked it out rather well. GG, as they say. I've heard theories similar to that, Leander. Like someone's literally like, nah, hang on. Although that doesn't explain a certain scene in Skyrim, but we'll get there when we get there. So sure, I'll go with Acrobat. Yes. You can, of course, just say custom.
I thought so. A few rats and goblins won't give you any trouble.
Damn right. So what after the sewers?
You must get the amulet to Joffrey. Take no chances, but proceed to Wayne Priory immediately. Got it?
You got it.
Good. The Emperor's trust was well placed.
You're damn right it was. What are you going to do, Boris?
I'll stay here to guard the Emperor's body and make sure no one follows you. You'd better get moving. May Talos guide you. By the way, thanks for recovering Captain Renault's sword.
You're welcome.
I'll see that it is given a place of honor in the halls of the Blades.
Absolutely. All right. So, whether or not... horse armor! Okay, let's pause to talk about horse armor for just a second. I've actually mentioned this before in many times in my show, because it's actually been relevant many times in my show. But I know some of you were around when this game came out. Actually, I guess all of you were. But I know some of you were like an active part of the video gaming community when this came out. Do you remember the fervor about this? The rancor? The venomous spitting that happened? I mean, people were up in arms about this. Every news site was bashing this. Every forum was alive with people saying, oh, this is terrible. I couldn't talk about this in real life without people being like, frickin' horse armor. I have to pay $5 for horse armor. It was insane. Now, this was 2006, so it was a different gaming industry back then. But it is kind of funny to look at Battlefront 2 EA versus Oblivion. I mean, you know? Oh my gosh. It is kind of funny. But as I've said before, this is Bethesda doing what Bethesda have been doing for a long time. I call it pushing the bubble. Like, all right, how much can we get away with? And horse armor was specifically singled out because it wasn't actually the only DLC. So they had 2 expansions. One, Knights of the Nine, debatably an expansion. One, Shivering Isles, definitely an expansion. But they also had other DLC. The Battleborn thing, Bladespire, or Battlespire, whatever the hell it's called. Or maybe it was Cragspire. There's the Mage Town. There's the Mage House, the Thief House, the Fighter House. Like, all 3 of those are a DLC. So it's Battlehorn, Frost, Cragspire. I think I was getting those screwed up there. So those were DLCs. Nobody really made a mess about those because you get some really nice, useful gameplay stuff, and it's cool and awesome. But everyone was really up in arms about the fact that you get this cosmetic thing, and it was just cosmetic for $5. Why would anyone do that? And as Jongo pointed out earlier, it did kind of start, in many ways, the precedent, because though this was not the origination of DLC or cosmetic DLC, it was one of the first big companies to really try and push this kind of thing in a major AAA game. Battlehorn Castle, Frostcracker, Deepscorn Hollow. And of course, yeah, the Pirate Cove thing. I have all of them, obviously. I've had them for forever. Quests will just be showing up for a few minutes here. Here's another one, Dunborough Cove. That's the one that we couldn't think of the name of just now. Yeah, Hearthfire in Skyrim was basically the same thing, yeah. There's Frost Cragspire. There's Mehrunes Razor, the only Morag Tong in Oblivion. There's Deepscorn Hollow. Oh, Shivering Isles was phenomenal. You kidding me? There's Battlehorn Castle. That's my personal favorite of them, by the way, Battlehorn Castle. Although, if you're any kind of mage, the Spire is super useful. Like, some people I know refuse to use it because it's tantamount to cheating. Because of how useful it is. Like, it's super duper useful. Now, this is going to sound weird, but I wish they used the sewers either more or just had more variety to the dungeons. I've talked before about how there's like the 3 dungeons in Oblivion, you know, and there's reasons for that. And there's other things from that. But they almost never use the sewers. There's very few sewer dungeons in the game. In fact, we're in one of the only ones. There's actually a quest to come back here later. Actually, excuse me, there's several quests to come back here later. And I guess purely because of the fact that it is variety in dungeon design is part of why I'm like, yay, because it's not frickin'... So we got alien ruins, caves, and underground forts. Like, those are the 3 big ones, right? There's probably a few I'm missing, but those are the ones you just see over and over and over again. Anyways, the thing I was going to say earlier is this is basically your... This is just a really brief, okay,